Hello everybody! Welcome back to Code Thoughts with Profanis. Today we are diving into linked signals in Angular. We'll start with an easy to digest example and then we will see some real-life use cases. Till the end of this video, you will know how to use the linked signal. So let's get started. I have prepared here a very small example, and what we can see is that into my app component.ts I have my list of items where this is just a signal of some items. Item 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now, like I said in the beginning of the video, what we would like to do is to have an easy to digest example. Let's assume that we would like to have the count of these items. So how can we do that? Well, let's do this by using the computed. So the count of items, and I will use the computed, and this is going to be, let me have here the function, the list of items, and then of course I need to have my length. By using the computed, what we're doing is that this signal value derives from this list of items. And whenever we have a change into the list of items, then this count of items will be reflected. So let's see, let's go and use that. If I go now into my HTML and use the count of items, and if we go into the browser, we can see here we have the number 4. Nice. This means that this works exactly as we would like to have. How about now if for any reason we would like to change this value? I have here this method, change the count of items, and I would like to be like, you know what? I want the count of items to change the value. And as you can see, we do not have here the method to change this value of the count of items. And the reason is that this is just a signal, a non-writable signal. And this is the response of the computed. So instead of using the computed, what we can use is the linked signal. And the linked signal in this case works exactly similar to the computed, with the difference that this is a writable signal. Before we see how to change the value, let's go to the browser and see what we have. And again, here we have the value 4. How about now if I want to change the value? What we can do is, as you can see, I have here the set and the update. So let's use here the update, and what we would like to do is, this one. We would like to increase the counter by 1. And just for the sake of this example, let's create a button here and invoke that button. So this will be my click, and I would like to change the count of items here. And this will be click me. So let's go to the browser to see what we have. If I click the button, I would expect the 4 to be increased by 1 and become 5. And this is it. So we're increasing the counter. Similarly, what we can do instead of course, increasing the count of items directly, we can just go and add some items into the list of items. So let's do that. I would like here to have my list of items, and I would like to update that. And let's use this value. What we have the items, and I think this is okay to have. And we have item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4. And as soon as we invoke that value, we expect to have one more item. And of course, the count of items should be increased automatically. So let's see. Let's go and give it a try. I will click this one, and we can see that we have new items, and automatically the counter is getting increased. Nice. So this seems to work as expected. So let's now do the following. What I would like to do is to write the exact same thing with the linked signal, but this time with a different notation, and we'll see the differences of that new notation. So let me comment this out, and again, I will have here the count of items, and this time, again, I will have my linked signal, and as you can see, instead of starting with a function, I'm providing here just an object. And into the object, I would like to have a source. And my source will be the list of items, and I will explain what's happening here. And then I want also to have the computation. And the computation will be just a function, an arrow function. So let's see what is happening here and what is this source. Before we explain this one, let's focus first here into the commented out code. Here we have the linked signal. And the linked signal, we said that returns a new signal, and the new signal derives from another one, right? So this guy derives from the list of items. So in this case, the list of items is my source, which is this one that we're describing here. So let's now focus into this one, into this notation. So we have the count of items, and what we're saying is that I would like to derive a new value based on this source. And my source will be just the list of items. But then we need to do something with this kind of data. We need to get the data and return a computation. And this is why we have here the computation function. And into the items, we will have the raw value of the list of items signaled. And what we're returning is just the items.length. And if we go now to the HTML, everything works as expected. We do not have any compilation error. And if we go to the browser, we can see that we have the value that we expect to have. Nice. So this works just fine. Some of you might think that this is the actual syntax and this is a syntactic sugar. Well, this is not the case. And till the end of this video, you will see how to use that. And I know that returning just the length of this source item, either here or here, is not that a real-life scenario. So let's now see a real-life scenario of how to use the linked signal if we have a signal input in our component. So let's see how we can have an accordion component. This is my accordion component, and this is how it looks like, the closed state. And if I click that, we can see that we're changing the chevron, and we have the actual content. And this is the open state. So we have two different states, open and closed state. Nice. So let's now go to see the code. This is no more like a custom accordion component, and what I have here just a div, and then I have another div where I have a click event, and whenever I'm toggling that, what I'm doing is that I'm keeping the state into an open signal. And of course, whenever this is false, I'm using this chevron, otherwise I'm using this one, and the same goes with the label. If this is open, I'm using the close open accordion, and the same thing is happening here. Whenever this is open, which means whenever this is true, I'm displaying the content. No more than that. And if we go now to see the code, what I have is just an isOpen, which is a signal, and initial value is false. And whenever I'm toggling this value, I'm just toggling the value of the isOpen. No more than that, which is a very simple example. But how about now, if we want the consumer of that component, which is my app component, to provide here a default value, something like isOpen equals, I would like to start by having the isOpen to true. How can we achieve that? Well, what we have to do is, of course, to change that from a signal value to an input signal. So let's do that. I will have here just my input here. And what we have is isOpen equals input false. And now if we go to the app component HTML and revert my change, we no longer have here a compilation error, which means that this is perfectly fine. We can use that. However, we have an issue here into the toggle method. Why? Because the signal input is a non-writable signal, and we cannot set the value, we cannot change the value. Instead, what we can do is to use a linked signal, and this is what we're going to do here. And in this case, I will create just a state, I will name it like that, and this is going to be a linked signal, and the only thing that I want to have here is just this open. No more than that. I would like the state to derive from my isOpen, and I missed here to have the parentheses. Either I will go with this one or I will go like that. It's the same thing. So what I was saying is that now the state will have the exact same value with the isOpen, and it will be in sync with whatever value we have here. And whenever now we're toggling the value, instead of changing the isOpen, what we're going to do is that we will change the isOpen, no more than that. And now let's go and do the same thing into my HTML so that we are consistent. And you might be thinking, wouldn't it be nice to change directly this value? Well, this is one of the changes that the Angular team decided to have. Whenever we are interacting with a component, what we're doing is that we provide a value to that component, and that value, we shouldn't change that. This is the API that we have provided to the consumers. A consumer sends the value, let's say true, and that value should remain into the component as is. We shouldn't change that. If we want to do something else with the value, what we have to do is, of course, to use another variable like we're doing here. And now if we go to the browser, what we can see is that the default state of this one is true. Why? Because we set it up here. And if we now start expanding and collapsing, things work as expected. So we just saw an example of how to use the linked signal in a real-life scenario. Let's now see one more example, and this time we will see the other notation, the notation that we discussed previously, where we have to provide the source and the computation. And for this one, let's see the example of no more like a drop-down menu. This is the example that I have prepared, and like I said, this is no more like a drop-down, a select menu. So let's see what we have here. If I click that, we can see that we have item 1, item 2, and item 3. And here we have the selected value. If I select the item 1, we can see here that we have the selected value. If I change that, of course, we have the other selected value. So let's go to the VS Code to see what we have in terms of implementation. And then I will explain why we have these kind of buttons. So let's go. So this is no more like a mat form field, and then I have a mat select where I'm iterating over a list of items. And as you can see here, I'm keeping the value into a selected item, and I'm providing the selected item via the interpolation here. So let's see what we have here into the list of items. Into the list of items, I have the item 1, item 2, and item 3. Let's now assume that during the application lifecycle, we have some HTTP calls, and these HTTP calls change the source of our items. So let's see what we have in terms of data. The default one is that we have 1, 2, 3. The other option is that we have 1, 2, 3, and we are providing just the 4 and 5, whereas into this method we have only 4 and 5, which means that this guy includes the default ones, which are 1, 2, 3. And this is why we have this kind of buttons. Whenever I'm clicking the change the source, including the previous items, what we expect to have is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's do that. I'm clicking that, and now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me just reload to start from scratch. And again, here I have 1, 2, 3, and if I click this, we expect to have only 4 and 5. And now let's highlight the requirements. The requirements here are the following. If I have a selected item and I change the source, and remember, into this source I have the default ones as well. I'm changing that, and I would expect to remain the state here and also to have the selected value, something that is not happening here in this case. Okay, so again, let's start from the beginning, and this time again I will select the item 1 and I will click this button, excluding the items. And if I do that, I would expect to clear both this state and the selected item. So let me do that. I'm doing that, and as you can see here, what we have is the selected item. We didn't clear this out, and the selected item, of course, is not selected. In both cases, the current implementation is not correct. So let's try to change that. And before, of course, we change, we have to pay attention into the problem. And the problem here is the selected item. It seems that the way that we are handling the selected item is not appropriate. So we would have to change the selected item and how we use that. So let's do the following. The selected item in this case will be based on linked signal again. And here I will have my linked signal. And you know what? In this case, I would prefer to have the notation where I can provide explicitly the source and the commutation. So the source of this one will be the list of items, and my commutation will be my items. And other than my items, what we can also do, let me go here. As you can see, the commutation has two different arguments. The first one is the source, and the second one is the previous values. And into the previous we have the source and the value. Okay, so let's give it a try. Here I have the items, and I also have my previous. Since I have now here my items and the previous, what I can do is to provide the following implementation. I would like to have my items. Remember, we have to return just the selected item. And for the selected item, we have to make sure that into the items, the previous selected item exists. So think that we have selected the item 1, and we have to make sure that the item 1 exists into the items. So how can we achieve that? Well, I will go and be like, you know what, I would like into my items to find the item where the item ID equals to previous value ID. Yeah, this is the implementation that we need to have. And of course, here I have an error. And to improve that, what I'm going to do is to provide the correct generic types. The correct generic types for this one is that I have my item array and also I have here my item. Well, this generic type, the item array, is the source of items, whereas the second one is the return type. And my return type will be just an item. So having this one, now it seems that I have an error here. And of course, yeah, this is with a lower I. And what we're doing here is that we are returning the item if the item exists. In any other case, I would like just to return null. And of course, here the generic type is helping us to provide the correct types. And the correct type would be this guy. So having this one, having the source and the computation, now if we go into the browser, we expect to have the correct implementation. So let's give it a try. Again, I will go with item 1. And what I would like to do now is to change the source. And I would like to remain the selected item here and have the selected state here as well. So I'm changing the source. And now it seems that we have the correct implementation. So let's now reload everything and start from the beginning. And this time I will select the item 1 and I will change the source excluding the default ones. And if I click that, we can see that we do not have a selected item here, and we do not have a selected item here either, which is nice. This is exactly what we want to do in terms of implementation. So this is how the linked signal works. And you might be wondering now, can I use the linked signal with multiple signal sources? I do not have a concrete real-life scenario, but we can just give it a try together. So what I'm going to do here is the following. So let's start, let's say here, and let's assume that we have two different signals. The first signal will be the signal value A, and then I will have the signal value B with a default value of 2. And now I would like to have a summary of both of them. I just want to have 1 plus 2. I know this doesn't make sense, but at least we will see how to use the linked signal. So let's have here the computed value like the copilot suggested. And this time I want to have the linked signal. And what I will do here is that I will provide directly the generic types. So what we're trying to do here is to provide multiple sources. So I will have here my source 1, which is going to be of type number. And then I would like to have another source will be again of type number. And if you remember, this is the first generic type is for my source of items. And the second generic type is the return type. And my return type I want to be just a number. And now this guy, I will go and be like, you know what, my source, I would like to have for the source, I will have the signal value and I have to invoke that and I have to invoke that as well. I realize that I'm using source here, and source here, which doesn't make that much sense, but you get the idea. And then the computation for this one will be this guy. And now if I grab this one, the computed value, and use that into my app component HTML, I would expect to have into the browser the value 3. And this is what I have. So this is how the linked signal works. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and do not forget to subscribe and click the ring bell.